The next morning, Ambassador Veltar led the human team through the grand halls of Valthara toward the throne room. Tony walked with the group, but his mind was focused on the strange symbols he kept seeing on the walls. The writing seemed to be getting more complex as they moved deeper into the station. "The patterns are changing," he whispered to Dr. Thompson. "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "The symbols on the walls. They're not just decoration. They're telling a story, but I can only understand pieces of it. Commander Rodriguez overheard them. Stay with the group, Tony. This isn't the time to go exploring." But Tony couldn't help himself. The symbols were calling to him somehow. As they walked through a large ceremonial hall, he saw a corridor that the others hadn't noticed. The walls, they were covered with symbols that seemed to glow brighter as he looked at them. The ceremony began in the throne room. Queen Zarathes sat on a throne made of what looked like solid light. She was the most beautiful alien any of them had ever seen. Her crystal skin seemed to contain entire galaxies, and her eyes held the wisdom of ages. Captain Martinez began the formal greetings, but Tony found it hard to pay attention. The symbols he had seen in the corridor kept floating through his mind. They seemed to be saying something important, something about the chamber of waiting and the path of the chosen one. During a break in the ceremony, Tony quietly slipped away from the group. He told himself he would only be gone for a few minutes. He just needed to understand what those symbols meant. The corridor was longer than he had expected. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a soft light as he walked past them. Tony pulled out his tablet and tried to translate what he was seeing. "The time of waiting ends when the seeker finds the path," he read aloud. "The one who hears the call will open the door that has waited since the first star died." The corridor led to other passages, each one more ancient-looking than the last. Tony realized he was moving into the oldest part of the station. The walls here were not crystal, but some other material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He should have turned back. He knew that, but something was pulling him forward, like a voice calling his name that he could almost but not quite hear. Finally, he came to a massive door. It was twice as tall as a human and covered with symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. But as he approached, the symbols began to make sense. They were not just writing, they were some kind of key, and his mind was the lock they were meant to open. Tony reached out and touched the door. It opened silently, like it had been waiting for him his whole life. Inside was the most beautiful room he had ever seen. The walls seemed to contain entire star systems. Nebulas swirled in slow motion across the ceiling. And in the center of it all stood Queen Zarathes herself, even more magnificent than she had appeared in the throne room. Tony's heart nearly stopped. He had just walked into the private chambers of an alien queen without permission. This was exactly the kind of mistake that could start a war. "Oh, no," he gasped, dropping to his knees. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just following the symbols, and they led me here, but I should never have come, without permission. Please don't blame my people for my mistake. I'll accept whatever punishment you think is right." The words tumbled out of him in a rush. He expected guards to come running. He expected to be arrested, or worse. Instead, he heard the most beautiful sound in the universe. The Queen was laughing. Not a mean laugh, but a laugh full of joy and relief. When Tony finally looked up, he saw that her eyes were shining with what looked like tears. "Stand up, young seeker," she said in perfect English, her voice like music. "I was waiting for you." Tony got slowly to his feet, confused. "Waiting for me? But Your Majesty, I'm nobody special. I'm just a language expert. Queen Zarathus stepped closer to him. Up close, he could see that her crystal skin really did contain moving stars and galaxies. It was like looking at the universe itself. "You are far more than you know, Tony Blake," she said. "This chamber has been prepared for 3,000 years, waiting for the day when a young human with the gift of understanding would find his way to me." 3,000 years? Tony's mind reeled. But humans have only been in space for a few decades. We have been watching your people for much longer than that, the Queen said. We have seen your wars, your discoveries, your dreams of reaching the stars. We have been waiting for you to grow strong enough for what is coming. She gestured to the walls around them. This chamber responds only to the touch of the one it was made for. No Zarathi has ever been able to enter this room. It was built by the ancients who came before us, and they left instructions that we were to keep it safe until the day when one of your kind would arrive to claim it. Tony looked around the room with new eyes. Claim it? I don't understand. You will, the Queen said softly. But first, you must understand why we really asked you to come here. It was not just for friendship, though we do wish to be friends with humanity. The Queen moved to what looked like a window, but instead of showing space outside, it showed images of distant galaxies. Tell me, Tony Blake, what do you know of the dark spaces between the stars? You mean empty space? Tony asked. It is not empty, the Queen said. And for the first time, Tony heard fear in her voice. Something lives in the darkness between galaxies, something that consumes entire civilizations and grows stronger with each world it devours. The images in the window changed, showing scenes of destruction. Whole planets going dark, entire star systems vanishing as if they had never existed. The void swarm, the Queen whispered. It destroyed the civilization that built this chamber. It has destroyed dozens of others since then. And now, after sleeping for 1,000 years, it is waking up again. Tony felt a chill run down his spine. When? Our calculations show it. We'll reach this part of the galaxy in 50 years, maybe less. The Queen turned back to him. The ancients who built this chamber studied the swarm for centuries before they fell. They discovered that it could only be defeated by a species with very specific traits. A young race that grows stronger when faced with impossible odds. A people who refuse to give up even when all hope seems lost. Tony's mouth went dry. You think that's humans? Queen Zarathus smiled, and in that smile, Tony saw hope that had been waiting for 3,000 years. I know it is, she said. The question is, are you ready to learn why? Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the human ship New Horizon and watched the massive alien space station grow larger on the main screen. The station was bigger than any city on Earth. It looked like a giant crystal floating in space, with lights that sparkled like stars. This was Valthara, the home of the Zarathi Empire. Jake had been a captain for 15 years, but he had never felt this nervous before. Today, humans would meet with aliens for the first time in history. The whole future of humanity might depend on how well this meeting went. Captain, we're getting a signal from the Zarathi, said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the communications desk. They're giving us permission to dock. Take us in slowly, Jake ordered. He looked around at his crew. Everyone was trying to look calm, but he could see the excitement and fear in their eyes. Dr. Lisa Thompson walked onto the bridge carrying a tablet full of notes. She was the ship's expert on alien life. For months, She had been studying everything they knew about the Zarathi. It was not much. The aliens had contacted Earth 6 months ago with a simple message. We wish to meet with the humans. Come to these coordinates if you seek friendship. Any last thoughts, Doc? Jake asked her. Lisa shook her head. The Zarathi are unlike anything we've ever seen. They're very old, maybe thousands of years older than human civilization. They seem peaceful, but we really don't know what they want. Commander Alex Rodriguez joined them on the bridge. He was in charge of security for the mission. Alex was a big man with careful eyes who always thought about danger first. My team is ready, Captain. We have weapons, but I hope we don't need them. We won't, said a young voice from behind them. Tony Blake walked up to the group. He was only 25 years old, but he was the best language expert Earth had. For the past year, Tony had been studying the few Zarathi messages that Earth had received. He had learned to understand their language better than anyone else. You sound very sure about that, Alex said, looking at Tony with doubt. Tony nodded. The way they speak, the words they choose, everything tells me they don't want to fight. But there's something strange about their messages. It's like they're holding something back, like they're waiting for something. The New Horizon moved closer to the alien station. As they got near, they could see that the station was even more amazing than they had thought. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that changed colors. Strange ships moved around it like fish, swimming in the ocean. Docking bay is opening for us, Amy reported. Jake took a deep breath. This is it, people. Remember, we're not just representing ourselves. We're representing all of humanity. The ship settled into the docking bay with a soft bump. Through the windows, they could see the aliens waiting for them. The Zarathi were tall and thin, maybe 8 feet high. Their skin looked like it was made of clear crystal, and light seemed to move through their bodies. They had large eyes that glowed with a soft blue light. They're beautiful, Lisa whispered. A group of Zarathi approached the ship. The one in front wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight. When the airlock opened, this alien stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. Welcome, humans. I am Ambassador Veltar. We have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Jake stepped forward. I'm Captain Jake Martinez. We're honored to meet you. The alien's eyes seemed to smile, though its face didn't change much. Please follow me. Our queen wishes to welcome you personally. As they walked through the station, Tony couldn't stop looking around. The walls were covered with symbols and writing in the Zarathi language. Some of the symbols looked very old, while others seemed to glow with fresh energy. He tried to read them, but many were in an older form of the language that he didn't understand yet. Your station is incredible, Lisa said to Ambassador Veltar. Valthara has been our home for 3,000 years, the alien replied. It has seen many changes, many visitors, but none quite like you. They entered a large hall where more Zarathi waited. The room was filled with soft music that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The aliens moved with a grace that made them look like they were dancing even when they were just walking. Our queen will meet with you tomorrow, Veltar explained. Tonight, we feast and learn about each other. The evening was full of wonders. The Zarathi showed them art that moved and changed as you watched it. They played music that seemed to touch something deep inside the human soul. They shared food that tasted like nothing on Earth, but somehow felt familiar. But Tony noticed that whenever he asked certain questions about Zarathi history or their queen, The aliens would change the subject. They were friendly, but they were definitely hiding something. Late that night, Tony sat in his room on the ship, studying his notes. The Zarathi language was beautiful, but there were patterns in it that didn't make sense. It was like they were speaking in code, even when they seemed to be having normal conversations. He found references to something called the waiting time and the one who will come. When he asked Veltar about these phrases, the alien had just smiled and said, "All will be clear tomorrow." Tony fell asleep thinking about the strange symbols he had seen on the walls. In his dreams, the symbols seemed to move and dance, leading him down long corridors toward something important. But every time he got close to understanding what it was, he would wake up. The next morning would bring the formal meeting with Queen Zarathis. None of the humans knew that this meeting would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. Queen Zarathis moved to the center of the chamber, and the room responded to her presence. The walls began to show new images, like a movie playing all around them. Tony watched in amazement as the history of the galaxy unfolded before his eyes. Long ago, the Queen began, this galaxy was full of life. Hundreds of civilizations lived in peace, sharing knowledge and helping each other grow. We called ourselves the Eternal Alliance. The images showed beautiful cities on countless worlds, ships traveling between the stars, and dozens of different alien species working together. Tony saw creatures made of living energy, beings that looked like walking trees, and others that seemed to be made of pure thought. "My people, the Zarathi, were young then," the Queen continued. "We had just learned to travel between stars when the Alliance found us. They taught us so much. How to build cities that could last forever. How to understand the deepest secrets of the universe. How to live in harmony with all forms of life." The images changed, showing the Zarathi learning from their teachers. Tony could see that even thousands of years ago, they had been curious and eager to learn, much like humans. But then the void swarm came. The beautiful images suddenly turned dark. Tony saw something that made his blood run cold. It was like looking at hunger itself given form. The swarm was not ships or creatures, but something much worse. It was living darkness that ate entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The first worlds to fall sent out warnings, the Queen said, her voice heavy with old sadness. But by the time the Alliance understood what they were facing, it was almost too late. Tony watched civilizations that had existed for millions of years disappear in months. Whole races of beings vanished as if they had never existed. The Alliance fought back with weapons that could destroy stars, but nothing seemed to slow the swarm down. "The worst part was not the death," the Queen said quietly. "It was what the swarm did to the survivors. Those who faced it and lived became changed. They lost hope. They gave up fighting. Some species simply stopped having children, believing there was no point in bringing new life into a universe that the swarm would eventually consume. But some fought to the end," Tony said, seeing images of desperate last battles. "Yes," the Queen smiled sadly. "And those final battles taught us something important. The swarm could be hurt, but only by beings who refused to accept defeat. The species that fought the hardest, that kept looking for new ways to resist even when everything seemed hopeless, those were the ones that damaged the swarm the most. The images showed the final days of the Alliance, the last great minds working together on something that looked like the chamber Tony was standing in. Survivors of the Alliance built this place, the Queen explained. They used all their remaining knowledge to create a prophecy machine, something that could look into possible futures and find a path to victory. A prophecy machine? Tony had trouble believing what he was hearing. Think of it as a very advanced computer that can calculate probability across millions of years, the Queen said. It studied every species in the galaxy, every possible future, every way the swarm might be defeated. And in all those calculations, it found only one path to victory. The images changed again, showing a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Tony's heart jumped as he recognized Earth. A young species would arise on a world of extremes, the Queen recited from memory. They would know war and peace, creation and destruction. They would be curious enough to reach for the stars, but wise enough to care for each other. Most importantly, they would have the gift that all other species had lost. What gift? Tony asked. The ability to see opportunity in disaster, the refusal to give up when all seems lost, the crazy idea that impossible problems exist to be solved, not to be accepted. Tony felt a chill run through him. Those did sound like human traits. The prophecy was very specific, the Queen continued. When this species was ready, one of their kind would come seeking knowledge. He would be young, curious about languages and communication. He would find his way to this chamber not by accident, but because his mind could hear the call that we have been sending for 3,000 years. You've been sending a call? Tony asked. A psychic beacon, designed to attract only the right kind of mind. Every human who has come near Valthara has felt it. But you are the first one who could understand it well enough to follow it here. Meanwhile, back in the throne room, Captain Martinez was starting to worry. "Where's Tony?" he asked Dr. Thompson. "I thought he was right behind us," Lisa said, looking around nervously. Commander Rodriguez was already moving. "I'll find him. He can't have gone far." But as Alex began searching the station, he discovered that Tony had vanished completely. The Zerathis seemed surprised by this news, but not worried. "Perhaps he is exploring," Ambassador Veltar suggested. "Humans are very curious, are they not?" Back in the chamber, Queen Zarathes was showing Tony more visions. These ones showed possible futures where humanity led a new alliance against the Void Swarm. "But why us?" Tony asked. "Surely other species could learn to fight like humans do." "They tried," the Queen said sadly. "After the swarm was defeated the first time, other species attempted to develop the traits that humans have naturally. But you cannot teach someone to hope when they have seen their entire civilization destroyed. You cannot learn to be stubborn when you have lived for millions of years and know how small you are in the universe." She gestured to herself. "My people have lived for so long that we have become careful, cautious. We think in terms of centuries and millennia, but humans think in terms of single lifetimes, which makes you willing to take risks that we would never consider. So you want us to fight this swarm thing for you?" Tony felt a flash of anger. "No," the Queen said firmly. "We want to fight it, with you." The prophecy was clear about this too. Humanity cannot face the swarm alone, but other species cannot face it without humanity's leadership. Only together do we have a chance. Tony sat down heavily on what looked like a chair made of solidified starlight. "This is too much. I'm just one person. I can't speak for all of humanity." "You are not just one person," the Queen said gently. "You are the first, the one the prophecy spoke of. Your mind has already been changed by being in this chamber. You can feel it, can you not? Tony realized she was right. Something was different. He could understand the Zarathi language perfectly now, without needing to think about it. More than that, he could sense emotions and thoughts from the Queen that had nothing to do with words. What's happening to me? You are becoming what humanity needs, the Queen said. A bridge between your people and the rest of the galaxy. But do not worry. You are still human. You will always be human. That is the most important part. Outside the chamber, Commander Rodriguez was getting frustrated. He had searched half the station and found no trace of Tony. "This doesn't make sense," he told Captain Martinez over his communicator. "It's like he just disappeared." "Keep looking," Jake ordered. "And get Dr. Thompson. If Tony found something interesting, she might be able to figure out what it was." But Tony was about to learn something that would change not just his life, but the future of every living being in the galaxy. Queen Zarathes moved to a wall that looked like it was made of flowing water. When she touched it, the wall opened to reveal a small crystal device about the size of a human hand. It pulsed with soft light that seemed to match the rhythm of a heartbeat. "This is the memory core," she said, holding it carefully. "It contains the knowledge of 12 civilizations that fell to the Void Swarm. Everything they learned about fighting the darkness is stored inside." Tony stared at the crystal. Even from where he stood, he could feel power radiating from it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you must take it," the Queen said. "But I must warn you, the knowledge cannot simply be downloaded into your mind. You must experience it. You must live through the memories of those who came before, feel their fear, their pain, their final moments of despair." "That sounds dangerous." "It is," the Queen admitted. 3 other species tried to unlock the core after we found it. All of them failed. The memories drove them mad. Or they gave up when they saw how hopeless the fight seemed. 2 entire expeditions never returned from the mental trial. Tony felt his hands shaking. "What makes you think I'll do better?" The Queen smiled, and in her smile was 3,000 years of hope. "Because you are human. Your people have a saying, do they not? When the going gets tough, the tough get going." Tony almost laughed despite his fear. "You've really been studying us, haven't you?" "For longer than you know," she said. "Are you ready?" Tony took a deep breath. He thought about Captain Martinez and the rest of his team. He thought about Earth and all the people there who had no idea that their future was about to be decided by a nervous language expert on an alien space station. "What do I have to do?" The Queen handed him the crystal. The moment his fingers touched it, Tony felt like he was falling through space and time. Suddenly he was standing on a world he had never seen before. The sky was purple, and 3 suns hung overhead. Around him stood beings that looked like they were made of living metal. These were the Vorthak, the first species to encounter the Void Swarm. Tony was not just watching their memories. He was living them. He felt their confusion when their deep space monitors detected something impossible moving between the stars. He felt their fear when the first colony worlds stopped responding to communication. And he felt their horror when they realized what they were facing. The Vorthak had been proud of their military. They had ships that could crack planets and weapons that burned hotter than stars. But against the Void Swarm, their greatest weapons were like throwing pebbles at a hurricane. Tony experienced their final battle. He felt the metal beings' despair, as their last fleet was consumed by living darkness. In their final moments, they sent out a warning to anyone who might listen. Do not fight it directly. Find another way. The memory shifted, and Tony was somewhere else. Now he was experiencing the last days of the ethereal collective, beings made of pure energy who had thought they were beyond physical harm. They had tried to hide from the swarm by existing in higher dimensions, but the darkness had found them, even there. One after another, Tony lived through the fall of civilizations. The hive minds who had tried to outthink the swarm with their connected intelligence. The ancient builders who had created weapons the size of solar systems. The peaceful. Gardeners who had tried to reason with the darkness. All had failed. All had died in fear and despair. With each memory, Tony felt a weight settling on his soul. How could humanity hope to succeed where beings with millions of years of experience had failed? How could one small species from a backwater planet possibly stand against something that had destroyed empires spanning entire galaxies? The worst part was feeling the despair that had consumed each species in their final moments. Not just the fear of death, but the absolute certainty that everything they had ever done was meaningless. That life itself was just a brief flicker in a universe that belonged to darkness. Tony found himself on his knees in the chamber, the crystal still clutched in his hand. Tears were streaming down his face. "I can't," he whispered. "It's too much. They were all so much better than us, so much smarter, so much stronger. How can we possibly win?" Queen Zarathus knelt beside him. "This is where the others failed," she said softly. "They saw only the defeats. But you must look deeper. You must see what they could not." "What do you mean?" "Experience the memories. Again. But this time, do not focus on how they died. Focus on how they fought." Tony closed his eyes and let the memories flow through him again. But this time, instead of feeling overwhelmed by the defeats, he began to notice something else. Patterns, mistakes, opportunities that had been missed. The Vorthak had tried to fight the swarm head-on, but they had never adapted their tactics. Even when their weapons proved useless, they kept using the same strategies over and over. The ethereal collective had hidden in higher dimensions, but they had never thought to attack the swarm from those same dimensions. The hive minds had perfect coordination, but that also meant when one part was corrupted by the swarm's influence, the corruption spread to everything else instantly. Each species had incredible strengths, but they had also had fatal weaknesses. And worse, when their first plans failed, they had given up hope instead of trying something new. They never learned to fail forward, Tony said suddenly. "What does that mean?" the Queen asked. Tony's mind was racing now. "It's a human concept. When something doesn't work, you don't just give up. You learn from the failure and try something different. These civilizations were so advanced, so perfect in their own ways, that they never learned how to fail and keep going." He stood up, the crystal still glowing in his hand. "Humans fail all the time. We're used to it. When one approach doesn't work, we try another, and another, and another. We're too stubborn to know when to quit." The Queen's eyes were shining. "Yes. Do you see it now?" Tony nodded. "Each of these species damaged the swarm in some way before they fell. The Vorthak discovered that concentrated energy bursts could hurt it. The Ethereals learned that it has trouble with non-physical attacks. The Builders found that it avoids certain types of radiation. And now I need to figure out how to combine all their discoveries into something that might actually work." Tony felt a strange sensation, like his mind was expanding. The crystal was not just showing him memories anymore. It was connecting him to knowledge that had been waiting for 3,000 years to be understood. But just as Tony was beginning to grasp the full scope of what he was learning, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled over the Queen's communicator. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. Our sensors are detecting something on the edge of your solar system, something big, and it's not showing up on any of our star charts." The Queen's face went pale. "That is impossible. The swarm is not supposed to arrive for 50 years. Tony felt ice in his veins as he realized what this meant. The calculations had been wrong. The void swarm was already here, and humanity's crash, course in galactic warfare, was about to begin 50 years ahead of schedule. Tony ran through the corridors of Valthara with Queen Zarathes beside him, the memory core still clutched in his hand. The ancient knowledge flowing through his mind was overwhelming, but he forced himself to focus. Somewhere out there in space, the void swarm was approaching, and humanity was about to face its greatest test 50 years too early. They burst into the throne room where Captain Martinez, Dr. Thompson, and Commander Rodriguez were gathered around, a holographic display showing the edge of the solar system. "Tony!" Captain Martinez shouted with relief. "Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you." "There's no time to explain," Tony said, breathing hard. "Captain, we need to contact Earth immediately. Everything is about to change." "Change how?" Alex Rodriguez demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "What's that thing you're holding?" Before Tony could answer, the holographic display flickered and showed new readings. What they saw made everyone in the room go silent. It was a dark patch of space where stars should have been. But this was not empty darkness. This was something, actively consuming light itself, growing larger as they watched. "Dear God," Dr. Thompson whispered. "How big is that thing?" "Current estimates suggest it is roughly the size of Earth's moon," Ambassador Veltar said, his usual calm cracking. "But it is growing." Queen Zarathes stepped forward. "Captain Martinez, I must tell you something that will be difficult to accept. Your species has been chosen for a purpose that will determine the fate of every living being in this galaxy." "Chosen by who?" Jake asked. "By the last survivors of an ancient alliance that fell to what you see on that screen," the Queen replied. "The Void Swarm has returned, and only humanity can lead the fight against it." Tony felt the knowledge from the memory core organizing itself in his mind. Suddenly, he could see connections between things that had seemed unrelated moments before. "Captain, the Queen is telling the truth. This crystal contains the memories and knowledge of 12 civilizations that fought the swarm before. And I think I understand why we're the only ones who can win." "This is insane," Alex said. "We're one small ship with a crew of 30 people. That thing out there just ate 3 star systems for breakfast." "You are thinking like all the others did," Queen Zarathes said gently. "You see the size of the enemy and assume you cannot win. But size is not what matters in this fight." Tony stepped forward, feeling strange new confidence flowing through him. "Alex, remember what you told me about asymmetric warfare back on Earth? How a small mobile force can defeat a larger, slower one if they use the right tactics?" "Yeah, but that was against other humans, not against some cosmic horror." "The principle is the same," Tony said. He held up the memory core, which was now glowing brighter than before. "Every species that fought the swarm before made the same mistake. They tried to match its strength with their strength. But that's not how humans fight." Dr. Thompson was studying the readings from the swarm. "Tony's right. Look at these energy patterns. The thing is massive, but it's also predictable. It moves in straight lines, consumes everything in its path, but it doesn't seem to adapt quickly to new threats. Exactly, Tony said, his mind racing, with possibilities. The Vorthak tried to outmuscle it. The ethereals tried to hide from it. The hive minds tried to outthink it. But humans would do something different. What? Captain Martinez asked. Tony grinned, and for a moment he looked like the excited young linguist who had first stepped aboard the New Horizon. We'd annoy it to death, Queen Zarathus laughed, a sound like silver bells. Yes, this is why the prophecy chose humans. You do not fight fair. Over the next hour, Tony shared everything he had learned from the memory core. The knowledge was staggering. Technologies that could turn stars into weapons, ships that could travel faster than light by riding gravitational waves, methods of communication that worked instantly across galactic distances. But more important than the technology was the understanding of how the swarm worked. It was not just a predator. It was like a cosmic forest fire, consuming everything in its path, but following predictable patterns. It has to feed constantly, Tony explained. Every time it destroys a civilization, it grows stronger, but it also becomes more dependent on finding new sources of energy. The longer we can keep it from feeding, the weaker it becomes. So we don't try to destroy it, Captain Martinez said, beginning to understand. We try to starve it, while also hitting it with everything the previous civilizations discovered, Dr. Thompson added. Like death by 1,000 cuts. Commander Rodriguez was studying tactical displays that Queen Zarathus had provided. This could actually work. If we can coordinate attacks from multiple directions, keep it moving, prevent it from settling into feed. But we will need more than one ship, the Queen said. Much more. Tony felt something shift in his mind as the memory core's knowledge fully integrated with his consciousness. Suddenly, he could see the entire galaxy as if he were looking at a map. He could sense other surviving civilizations, hidden colonies, ancient weapons caches that had been waiting for someone to find them. We don't have to start with just one ship, he said. There are others out there. Survivors from dozens of species, hiding in the dark spaces between stars. They've been waiting for someone to give them hope. How do you know that? Lisa asked. Tony held up the memory core. Because they've been sending out signals for centuries, hoping someone would answer. The core can hear them all. Queen Zarathus nodded. The Zerathi have ships and technology to share, and we know where the ancient weapon caches are hidden. This is happening too fast, Alex protested. Yesterday we were just a diplomatic mission. Now you're talking about leading an intergalactic war. The war was always coming, Tony said quietly. We just didn't know it yet. The only question is whether we fight it on our terms or on the swarm's terms. Captain Martinez made the decision that would change human history forever. Tony, can you get us back to Earth safely? Yes, sir. Then we're going home. We need to warn our people and start preparing. He turned to Queen Zarathus. Your Majesty, will your people stand with us? Until the last star burns out, she replied. As the New Horizon prepared to leave Velthara, Tony stood on the bridge with the memory core in his hands. Through it, he could sense other human ships scattered throughout the galaxy, explorers and scientists who had gone out to study the stars. Soon they would all receive the same message that would reach Earth. The message was simple. Come home. Bring everything you've learned. Humanity has work to do. Dr. Thompson stood beside him, looking out at the stars. Are you scared? She asked. Tony thought about the question seriously. Terrified, he admitted, but also excited. Do you know what this means, Lisa? For the first time in galactic history, the Void Swarm is going to face an enemy that gets more dangerous when it's cornered. Behind them, Captain Martinez was already composing messages that would be sent to every human colony, every Earth government, every military command. The messages would seem impossible to believe, but they would be accompanied by proof that could not be denied. Commander Rodriguez was studying the tactical data that Queen Zarathes had provided. You know, he said to Tony, I'm starting to think this might actually be fun. Tony laughed. Only a human would think that fighting a galaxy-eating monster sounds fun. Exactly, Alex grinned. Which is probably why we're going to win. As the New Horizon jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying the most important message in human history back to Earth, Tony felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. In 50 years, the Void Swarm would reach inhabited space, but it would not find the scattered, frightened civilizations it had always encountered before. It would find humanity, and humanity would be ready. The age of human expansion was about to begin, but not in the way anyone had ever imagined. Instead of conquering the galaxy, humans would save it. Instead of ruling over other species, they would teach them how to fight back against the darkness. And at the center of it all would be a young linguist who had stumbled into an alien queen's chamber and discovered that sometimes the most important conversations in the universe begin with an apology. The stars ahead seemed brighter somehow, as if they knew that help was finally coming. The journey back to Earth took 3 days, but for Tony Blake, it felt like 3 years. The memory core had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He could understand not just alien languages now, but the deeper patterns behind them. When he looked at star charts, he could sense which systems had life and which were empty. Most disturbing of all, he could feel the void swarm like a cold shadow at the edge of his mind. Captain Martinez found him in the ship's small observation deck, staring out at the stars, with the memory core resting in his lap. "How are you holding up?" Jake asked, settling into the chair beside him. "I keep seeing things that haven't happened yet," Tony said quietly. "Battles that might be fought. Worlds that might be saved or lost. The core doesn't just contain memories of the past. It's showing me possible futures. Are they good futures?" Tony was quiet for a long moment. "Some of them are. In the best ones, humanity becomes something amazing. We unite dozens of species, build cities that span solar systems, and push back the darkness for good. But in the worst ones, we lose, we win, but we become something else in the process. Something cold and calculating like the swarm itself." Tony turned to look at the captain. "The core is warning me about that. Power like this changes people. It changed the civilizations that came before us." Captain Martinez nodded slowly. "That's why you're the right person for this job, Tony. You're worried about staying human. Someone who was hungry for power wouldn't have that concern." Dr. Thompson's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain, we're receiving a priority signal from Earth Command. They want to speak with you immediately." Jake sighed. "I guess word of our little diplomatic mission has gotten back home." When they reached the bridge, Admiral Patricia Wells was waiting on the main screen. She was a stern woman in her 60s who had been running Earth's space operations for over a decade. Her expression suggested she was not happy. "Captain Martinez," she said without preamble, "I'm looking at reports that claim you've made contact with hostile aliens and that one of your crew members has been compromised by alien technology. Please tell me these reports are exaggerated. Admiral, with respect, the reports don't even come close to describing what we've discovered, Jake replied. We need to speak in person. This is too important for subspace communication. Captain, you will return to Earth Station immediately and submit to a full debriefing. Your crew will be placed in quarantine until we can determine what exactly happened out there. Tony stepped forward. Admiral Wells, may I speak? The Admiral's eyes narrowed as she noticed the glowing crystal in his hands. You must be Blake, the linguist. What is that device you're carrying? It's the key to saving every living being in the galaxy, Tony said simply. And we have about 49 years to figure out how to use it. Explain. Tony took a deep breath and began to tell the story. He kept it simple, focusing on the facts. An ancient threat was returning. Humanity had been chosen to lead the defense. Time was running out. Admiral Wells listened without interruption, but her expression grew more skeptical with each word. When Tony finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Blake, are you asking me to believe that aliens have been watching us for thousands of years, waiting for us to evolve into galactic saviors? I'm asking you to look at the evidence, Tony replied. He held up the memory core. This device contains technology that's millions of years ahead of anything we have. Dr. Thompson can verify that. It also contains star charts showing the location of every habitable world in this part of the galaxy. Commander Rodriguez can confirm that the tactical information is beyond anything in our databases. And you expect me to base military policy on alien fairy tales? Before Tony could answer, Commander Rodriguez stepped forward. Admiral, I've been a soldier for 20 years. I know the difference between fantasy and real threat assessment. What Mr. Blake is describing matches every pattern we know about asymmetric warfare and force multiplication. If there's even a chance he's right, we need to start preparing. Dr. Thompson added her voice. Admiral, the biological scans I've run on Tony show that his brain activity has increased dramatically. The alien device has definitely affected him, but in ways that seem to be enhancing his natural abilities rather than controlling him. Admiral Wells studied their faces through the screen. Assuming for a moment that any of this is true, what exactly are you asking Earth to do? Start building, Tony said. Ships, weapons, training facilities. But more than that, we need to start reaching out to other species. The Queen gave us contact information for dozens of survivor groups scattered throughout the galaxy. We need to bring them together. And who exactly would lead this grand alliance? We would, Captain Martinez said firmly. Humanity would take the lead, but as partners, not conquerors. The other species have the knowledge and experience. We have the adaptability and determination. Admiral Wells shook her head. This is madness. Even if I believed every word of this story, Earth doesn't have the resources to build an interstellar fleet in 50 years. We don't have 50 years, Tony said quietly. The swarm has already arrived at the edge of Zerathi space. It's moving, faster than the ancient calculations predicted. We might have 5 years before it reaches inhabited systems. The color drained from the Admiral's face. 5 years? Maybe less, Tony confirmed. But Admiral, that might actually work in our favor. Humans have always done their best work under pressure. Over the next hour, Tony shared everything he could, remember from the memory core. Technical specifications for weapons that could crack moons. Designs for ships that could travel between galaxies. Most importantly, the locations of ancient weapon caches that had been hidden throughout the galaxy. There's a facility in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Tony explained. It's been there for thousands of years, waiting for someone with the right genetic markers to activate it. According to the core, it contains everything we need to start building a fleet. Admiral Wells was taking notes now, her skepticism slowly giving way to professional interest. Genetic markers? Human genetic markers, Dr. Thompson said. According to the data Tony has shared, our DNA contains sequences that were placed there by the Ancient Alliance. We're not just randomly chosen. We were literally designed for this purpose. That's impossible. Human evolution is well documented. Is it? Tony asked. How do you explain the rapid development of human intelligence over the last 100,000 years? How do you explain our unique ability to cooperate with other species when most intelligent life forms are naturally territorial? Admiral Wells was quiet for several minutes, studying the data they had transmitted. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Blake, if you're wrong about this, you'll have convinced Earth to waste enormous resources on a threat that doesn't exist. And if I'm right, but we do nothing, every human being who ever lives will die when the swarm reaches Earth, Tony replied. Admiral, Captain Martinez added, we can prove this. Send a ship to the coordinates Tony provided. If there's nothing there, then we're all crazy and you can lock us up. But if there is something there, Admiral Wells nodded slowly. I'll send a probe ship immediately. In the meantime, you'll return to Earth for a full examination. If your claims check out, Mr. Blake, you may find yourself the most important person in human history. Tony looked out at the stars ahead, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on him. Somewhere out there, ancient weapons were waiting to be awakened. Scattered alien refugees were hoping for rescue. And in the darkness between galaxies, something hungry was moving toward them all. I just hope I'm up for the job, he said quietly. 2 weeks later, Tony Blake stood in the most secure briefing room on Earth Station Alpha, watching Admiral Wells pace back and forth like a caged tiger. The probe ship had returned from the asteroid belt with news that had shaken the entire leadership of Earth Command. Explain to me again how a facility the size of Manhattan has been sitting in our own solar system for thousands of years without anyone noticing it, Admiral Wells said, stopping to stare at the holographic display, showing the probe's findings. Captain Martinez cleared his throat. According to the probe's scans, the facility is constructed from materials that deflect most forms of detection. It's essentially invisible unless you know exactly where to look and what to look for. And Mr. Blake knew exactly where to look. Because of his alien crystal, Admiral Wells said, glancing at Tony with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Tony nodded, holding up the memory core. The Ancient Alliance hid dozens of these facilities throughout the galaxy. This one was specifically placed in our solar system because they knew humans would eventually need it. Dr. Thompson pulled up detailed scans on the main screen. The facility appears to be completely automated. Our probes detected massive manufacturing capabilities, but everything is dormant. It's like it's waiting for an activation signal. What kind of activation signal? Asked General Robert Hayes, the head of Earth's military forces. He was a practical man who had been skeptical of the entire alien story until the probe had returned with undeniable proof. Me, Tony said simply. Or more accurately, human DNA with the specific genetic markers that the Alliance planted in our ancestors. According to the memory core, any human can activate the basic systems, but someone who has been enhanced by the core can access the advanced functions. Admiral Wells sat down heavily. Mr. Blake, are you telling me that you want to go out to this facility and turn on ancient alien weapons? Not just weapons, Tony corrected. The facility contains everything we need to build a modern space fleet. Ships, weapons, defensive systems, communication networks. But more importantly, It contains training programs that can teach humans how to use technologies that are millions of years ahead of anything we currently understand. Commander Rodriguez had been studying the tactical implications. Admiral, the probe detected manufacturing bays large enough to build ships bigger than anything in our current fleet. If Mr. Blake is right about what this facility can do, we could have a working space navy within months instead of decades. And if he's wrong, we could accidentally trigger something that destroys our entire solar system, General Hayes pointed out. Tony understood their fear. He felt it himself every time he accessed the memory core. The knowledge contained within it was vast and sometimes overwhelming, but he also felt the urgency of what was coming. General, I've seen what the Void Swarm does to civilizations that aren't prepared, Tony said. The Vorthak had 1,000 years to build their defenses. The Ethereal Collective had technology we can barely imagine. They all fell because they weren't ready when the swarm arrived. We have maybe 5 years. Dr. Thompson activated a new display showing readings from deep space monitoring stations. Actually, we might have less than that. I've been analyzing the data from Zarathi space, and the swarm is moving faster than any of the historical records suggested it could. The room fell silent as everyone studied the new projections. The dark patch that represented the Void Swarm had grown noticeably larger in just the past 2 weeks. How much less? Admiral Wells asked quietly. Best case scenario, 3 years, before it reaches the outer colonies, Dr. Thompson replied. Worst case, 18 months before it's in our solar system. General Hayes stood up abruptly. That settles it. We don't have time for caution. Mr. Blake, how soon can you activate this facility? I could leave today, Tony said, but I'd recommend taking a small team. If something goes wrong, you'll want people there who can shut things down. I'm going with him, Captain Martinez said immediately. As am I, added Commander Rodriguez. If we're about to build humanity's first real space fleet, someone with military experience needs to be involved from the beginning. Dr. Thompson nodded. And you'll need a scientist to document everything we discover. Admiral Wells looked around, the room at the faces of people who had become the most important decision-makers in human history. Very well. But we do this carefully. Mr. Blake, you'll have a full support team and enough firepower to level a small moon if something goes wrong. 3 days later, Tony found himself aboard the research vessel Discovery, approaching the coordinates where the ancient facility was hidden. As they drew closer, he felt the memory core responding to something. The crystal in his hands began to pulse with brighter light. There, he said suddenly, pointing at what looked like empty space. Right there. The ship's sensors showed nothing, but Tony was certain. Activate the detection protocols I gave you. Captain Sarah Davis, the commander of the Discovery, nodded to her crew. They adjusted the sensors according to specifications that Tony had provided from the memory core. Slowly, something began to appear on their screens. My God, Dr. Thompson whispered. It was enormous. The facility stretched for miles in every direction, a massive structure that looked like it had grown rather than been built. Organic curves flowed into geometric patterns. Crystalline formations jutted out from metallic surfaces that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Life signs? Captain Davis asked. None, her sensor operator reported. But the entire structure is generating some kind of low-level energy field. Tony closed his eyes and let the memory core guide him. There's a docking bay on the lower section. It's designed for ships like ours. As the Discovery approached the facility, sections of what had appeared to be solid wall began to open, revealing a docking bay that was perfectly sized for their ship. Lights came on automatically as they entered, and the bay sealed itself behind them. Atmosphere is breathable, the ship's science officer reported. Gravity is very close to Earth normal. Tony was already moving toward the airlock. The facility knows we're here. It's been waiting for us. When they stepped into the docking bay, Tony felt like he was entering a cathedral. The ceiling stretched high above them, covered with patterns that seemed to move in the corner of his vision. The walls were lined with symbols that looked familiar but different from the Zarathi writing he had learned to read. These are human symbols, Dr. Thompson said in amazement, studying the walls. Or rather, they're the symbols that human symbols evolved from. It's like seeing the parent language that gave birth to all human writing. Tony approached what looked like a control panel. When he placed his hand on it, the entire facility came to life. Lights blazed throughout the massive structure. Screens activated showing star charts and technical diagrams, and somewhere deep in the facility, machinery that had been silent for millennia began to hum with power. "Welcome, children of Earth," a voice said in perfect English. "We have been waiting for you to come home." The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, warm and welcoming, but also somehow ancient beyond measure. "I am the facility mind," the voice continued. "I was created by the Alliance to guide humanity when the time came to fulfill your destiny. Tony Blake, step forward." Tony approached the central console, feeling the memory core growing warm in his hands. "You have done well to come this far," the facility mind said. "Now, are you ready to learn what humanity was truly meant to become?"